Oh yes, hi. So hello again. This is sort of a continuation, I think, part 5 now of working with images that contain trees or bushes and plants that maybe we rendered against a white background in a 3D program possibly, or we painted in against a white background, and we tried to make that a transparent background so that we can use it as an asset in a 3D program or some other composition. But when you do that, the background color seems to be stuck along the edges, and you get this color glow. So I'm going to just run through that one more time, showing the other way to do that. So initially we'll go and open an image. And let's see, last time we used this one. This time I'm going to take this one. And let's make sure we see what's going on here. So I'm going to look for JPEG. There's actually there's a default target format, and then anything else it's using the ImageMagick plugin to look for it. And then there's also a layered format that's native to Dog Waffle. But with the automatic format, 60+ formats, we can look for the JPEGs. Let's open that and replace the current image, which was blank anyway. And what we'll do is we'll zoom out. In fact, what I'll do is I'll make this a little bit smaller. So I'll go to Image, Resample, and make it half the size. And let's go to Divide by 2. And you see the dimensions here. Still a fairly high resolution image, but a little bit faster to work with. And so a couple of things we need to do typically before we isolate this tree. One is perhaps to get rid of these other bushes and trees on the side here. Right, and there's some other garbage here. It's strange. This image may actually be partly corrupted, but nonetheless we can probably use it. Let's take a snapshot of that, store image copy. Want to do that every once in a while. You never know, you might need to get back to that. Alright, so how do we turn this into this area here with these foreground trees? How do we eliminate them? We could basically take the color we have here in the sky, which is a lighter, wider type of blue than the one up here, but we want to copy that over there. So let's use the oval selection tool, ellipse to alpha, right? And then with that we can go click here and then drag around and select an oval, about a circle maybe, or an oval about this size. There, that would be good enough. And we can also make it a little bit sort of softer. So with the selection tool we can go to Gaussian blur and give it a little bit of a blur. Now we don't see how much of a blur it has. This is showing the middle line, the 50% demarcation. So what you actually want to do is perhaps show to a selection overlay alpha, and then in that case when you zoom in particular you can see that it's got sort of an edge or a soft transition there. So I'm going to do selection blur alpha even more, and there you go. There you can see kind of a nice smooth transition. Right, so this marching ants is really showing where the 50% separation is. 100% selected inside, 0% selected on the outside. So transparent, opaque, or whichever way you look at it. I mean, it's a selection thing at this point. It's not an opacity or transparency thing. It will become that at some point, but here it's selected on the inside, and it gradually transitions to the outside to be non-selected. And so the marching ants will show you where the halfway is, where the 50-50 is, right? Now, one thing you can do is, under the brush menu, is to use the selection as a brush. Use selected as brush, and it's not going to take just what's inside this marching ants. It's going to go all the way to where the edge is, where it turns into 0%, where it's not selected. All right, so let's go do that. And so now we have a custom brush. We can barely see it here if we zoom out. If we move around over parts of a different color, maybe we need to make it a little bit more opaque. Increase the opacity right there to 100%. And you can see it nicely against the dark blue sky, but down here it's really difficult to see, but that's exactly what we want. Is we want to be able to paint with the same. Another thing you can also do is to set on the settings here a little bit of bleed. You can let the original color bleed through a little bit more. So now as you paint over this here, this is a good way to make these trees disappear. You're just painting over there and it's gradually taking them away. All right, let's zoom in a little bit more. Let's come in from the top and keep, I'm basically dragging down here And so there we go. All right, so that's one starting point, to have the tree isolated so it's only against the blue sky, even though it's not the same blue all over. There's some white haze along the horizon and darker, more saturated blue along the upper part. But that's good enough. That's good enough to go do our selection. So let's take a snapshot here. And you might want to, really, in the best of all worlds, you might want to save that on a file. I'm going to just take a snapshot in memory. It's in a different address space, so if the main program is crashes or something like that, you still have a chance to bring this up and do an emergency save. All right. So now what we have is this tree, and we want to go and isolate it. And there's a couple of places. There's all this area here with the tree, and then there's the trunk of the tree. And the trunk we can perhaps isolate easily with the magic wand. So with the magic wand, what I would do is simply click around here somewhere. Right now it's selected just a tiny little speck here. You can see it. Okay, that's because we didn't give it enough tolerance. So let's increase the tolerance a little bit. And so now it's selected much more, and maybe we want the tolerance even higher, and then also anti-aliased, so that it's going to select the entire sky. Now if you pick down here at the bottom, it's going to select and focus mostly on the whitish sky, whereas if you pick on the top part, it's going to select mostly the bluish sky, and you want to really have something in between, so pick somewhere in the middle. And then so at that point you should have a fairly good selection also on the tree trunk, without giving too much of it, without having too much of the white border area. And I think that will be a good starting point. So let's store this selection. Let's store it and see what's going on here. Store alpha under the selection menu. So really what we want to do is say the trunk is good, but the area up here is no good, because we have some holes in here. We should see through them, but it didn't see those. Why? Well, because it was cut off, right? You see all these leaves hanging down here, and there's a lot of parts where we see the sky, but we don't get to actually see it transparent. The selection didn't reach it because the magic wand stops the moment it sees a block here, a barrier. So what we need to do is work this area in a different way. That's why we take a snapshot of what we have so far, and we will use the bottom part, namely that the trunk, in this quick way to select it. And I'm going to go and select the upper part in a different way, and then I'm going to compose these or add them together. So what I really need to do is get rid of the upper part here and say, no, that's not selected yet. Right, this here I don't want. This part at the bottom I do want. All right, so how do we do that? Well, essentially what I'm going to do is to paint away, maybe with the rectangle tool here. Let's go with the rectangle selection tool, right? Or maybe with the oval tool. Either way, let's do the rectangle. That's a little bit easier to think of. In the upper left corner, drag down here and go. However, I don't want that exactly. I want to keep the stuff down that's down here. So let's go and undo that. Control Z or U for undo. Actually, that's too many undos. Let's go redo. Right click on the back arrow there, or A for again. And what I'll do now is use the shift key. So when you use a shift key, normally you add to the selection, and that may be exactly what we want here. Yep. So now we have basically the selection of everything around here except for the trunk. Well, if we invert it, right, let's go and invert the selection right around here. There it is, invert alpha. Now we have the trunk selected and nothing else. Right, so that's exactly what we're trying to do here in the first part, to get just the trunk. So let's go store that. We can do that right here. We don't need this one anymore. Let's do a get alpha. Right, so now we have just the trunk showing here as being selected. Good, that's one part. Now we need the upper part of the tree with the leaves. All right, so how do we get that? Well, that one I would say basically let's select it with based on the hue. Same mechanism I showed in another tutorial. Let's go to selection, select by color key, right? So the color key is going to be one of these blue tones here, but we don't want to get just the RGB difference. We want to hone in on the the hue difference, hue saturation value, HSV. So hue difference is going to allow us to select a blue tone that we're particularly interested in, and that blue tone is going to allow us to select what parts of this area here are actually part of that sky. And then the parts that are green, a different hue, or brown, again another hue, are not going to be selected. Except that there are some parts around here that are gray, light gray, maybe reflecting the sky bright enough that it seems to be picking it. And so maybe we need to change the tolerance here to say, no, don't go that far, right? And then maybe there's some other things. So you can play with this a little bit and see where you get it to the point where the tree is nicely selected. Let's click OK on that. But there's still some doubt about so we have these holes in between here that are selected because they're all part of the same hue, the same sky color. But there are some parts in here that are also selected, and we really don't want them selected. Well, that's exactly why we selected the trunk separately a little bit before. With the magic wand, we were able to get the trunk, and that one we will just recompose it in here, right? So we will add this stored copy of it into this selection. Now, right now the selection is on the outside. We need to first invert it before we do this thing, right? Before we combine the two. So let's make sure we invert the selection. In fact, let's first do a store alpha, so we just have a snapshot of that. That's this one here. And then we invert it. We can do that right here, actually. We can do it right here on the currently installed selection mask that's on the main image. That would be right here, vertical bar or invert alpha. But we can do it on the stored copy here, invert it, and then push that back into the main selection. Right, so now in that main selection, we have, zoom out here a little bit, we have the tree nicely selected. It's showing at its original green colors right there. Right? The sky is not selected, except there are some parts around here on the trunk that are still selected, that are not selected. I mean, most of the trunk is selected and showing at its original color, but you can tell there are some parts that it ended up not selecting because it was a very similar hue to the color in the sky. So what we can do now is we can add to this selection that is partly having some holes that are not selected. We can add this stored copy here. We can add that. Bingo. And now we have all the entire tree trunk selected, right? And only that got added. So now there may be still some parts where we didn't go up high enough, and there may be one or two places where the tree didn't get selected. Hey, maybe we can fix that in another way. Maybe we can just paint that selection right here, right click on this and say paint on alpha. All right, so we go maybe with the hard selection here. And as you go here with the preview, you can see the size of the brush. That's adequate enough. If you click here, it's going to select it. You don't want that. So right click instead and drag around. That's going to deselect. Well, here on the inside, sure enough, you do want to left click and drag in order to add to the selection in case there's any parts that are not selected right now. All right, so you want to experiment with that to make sure that you have the right mode here, selecting or not selecting. You see some parts that are still transparent here. The moment you see the magic wand, or rather the marching ants, that means it's probably something that you could do about that. Maybe change the size. Now this may be a custom brush. It won't change the size unless you allow it. So let's go do that. And so now you have probably a little bit of a selection you can fix here. Yep, you see it here in black. Let me zoom in a little bit more so you can see it better. Let's see, there's a little bit of a marching ant going on here in this area. See it? All right, so I'll just paint over that, and that will get rid of those marching ants, or that little Twinkie animation highlight. And that way I can be sure that my trunk is not going to show some bullet holes or whatever that might cause them. Termite holes, let's put them that way. Now there are some parts where we do need the holes, and that's for instance when we're actually looking at the sky, like this little vertical bar here. We don't want to go turn that opaque. That's really supposed to stay transparent, just like the holes here between the leaves. So those areas we definitely want to keep the way they are. All right, so we got that pretty much taken care of. Let's go store this image. Store this image. There you go. And we know that also stores the alpha channel that goes with it. We just don't see it here, but the alpha channel is there too. And in fact, let me close this here and close this one. One thing that we can do is we can if we mess this up, right? If we change this, maybe we clear it, or we turn the selection off, Control D, it's gone, right? Well, when you click on that stored copy that we have, that restores the colors. If you want, you can also restore the alpha channel, replace alpha right there. That's the alpha channel that was stored with the image, right? So it's back in place. Good. Let's see, selection, overlay alpha, don't need that. Marching ants, you can disable those actually, you don't have to see them all the time. But what's important now is that we can save that, right? So that image you want to save as a Targa image file, 32-bit, including RGB and alpha, right? Or another thing is you could pick that up as a custom brush. Now, before you do that, that's where you want to see, do you have to worry about those white glowing edges? This one probably not so much, but you might. And so just for the sake of the exercise, how do you fix the glowing edges if you have them here? If you have some white showing along the edges on that selection mask? Well, what you do is you simply go to the selection and you say you want to pre-multiply and do something about that color. Now you need to tell it what color you're talking about. You know, maybe you render that against a white background in a 3D program. In this case, it's not a 3D program that rendered it. In this case, it was photographed against a nice blue California sky. So what we need to do is tell what that blue is. And so I need to tell it simply using the color picker or turkey baster. There's a shortcut comma for that. So let's use the comma shortcut. There it is. And say, okay, I'm looking for this color here. Notice what's happening here on the right side. Under the black and the white, those are going to change primary and secondary color. So if I pick in this, that's not what I wanted. Let's undo that. Let's use comma again, and color picker allows you to change it. And so as you go up to the upper area or down to the bottom, you'll see this blue change because of course the sky is a little bit different color. Now I still have the pink showing here on top on the selection. So let me turn that off. That's the overlay alpha. If I need to see where the selection is, if I absolutely need that, if I doubt myself, right, I can go to show marching ants, and then that way I can see it. But you know, it's more distracting at this point. It's not really useful. So I'm going to temporarily hide it. It's not turning it off. It's actually keeping the alpha in place, but it's just not showing it. It's not wasting any compute time or cycles to tell me that that's where it is. So, because I don't need to know that anymore, I know that already, right? The only thing I care about now is to pick up that blue color. So let's move that over here so we can see it. Let me hit the comma to select the color picker and keep an eye again on this blue here. And so as I'm going up and down, you see it go to a darker blue or to a lighter blue. Anyway, somewhere in between here, that's probably the blue that I'm worried about, maybe around here. The blue that's going to be along the edges on these leaves. And that's where I'm most worried about getting rid of any sort of white edge or a glow effect or bluish glow effect in this case. So that being the primary color now, and I could have done that with the right button to put it in the secondary color instead. But if I have that in one of them, let's say the left button here for the primary color, I can now go to the selection mask, knowing that the selection is still there in place. I'm not seeing it because I said I don't want to show the marching ants, but the alpha is still on. And what I'll do is I'll say go pre-multiply. And that's similar to what we did earlier in the other tutorial under the brush, when we had the custom brush and we did a pre-multiply there, right? So, but this is perhaps a little bit easier to understand if you don't think so much through the brush, but rather through layers and images. So here we go, pre-multiply. And guess what? This is going to take care of changing the edge on your image so that it really looks like a transparent image without that edge. And the color might be black, it might be white, it might be blue, sky blue in this case. You need to tell us what color it is you're talking about that you want to remove. All right, so what color is it? It's not black in this case. We don't have black background. It wasn't white either. It wasn't white, but that's a common scenario, right? That you rendered something in 3D against a white background. In that case, we would want to remove the white. This case, though, we have the color loaded into a light blue into the primary color. So let's select that. You see it here. You can click on it all day long. It's not going to change anything. This is just showing you what the color is. That's the color that will be removed. right, along the edges. How does it do? How does it do that? Well, it takes the color that's already on the inner part of the leaves, right? A little math magic here. Looks at it and say, oh, let's push it out a little bit. Let's increase how far it goes, right? And then the alpha channel is still left unchanged, and it ends up looking like, oh, it's still that same color. It's not the blue color anymore, right? One click later, you're basically done. Now, there's some magic here, and it looks like weird, and you say, oh, wait, that's totally messed up. But you won't see that. We got the transparency mask here, right? We have a selection mask that says overlay alpha. All this is hidden. All this is not really visible. So it doesn't matter. What really matters is what colors are we seeing along the edges. And those are the ones that got properly modified in order to get rid of that light blue. All right, so at that point, we could say, okay, we still have the selection. Let's see it again as marching ants and pick it up as a custom brush. Let's go custom brush, use the selected as brush, boom. It actually clears the alpha channel at that point, but look, now we have it in the custom brush. And we can go and store that, brush, store and manage the copy there. And most importantly, you can save it. This is really one thing you should do at that point, is to save it, or save it to a file. There, under the brush menu, we're talking about what's in the brush, save that, and place it wherever you need as a Targa file perhaps first. That's a quick and safe way to go. So my new brush, there, my palm tree, and that's the second time we did that, so let's call that 02, and let's call it default Targa. There's a couple of other formats, but I'll show you why you want to go with default Targa first, and that way you can go and save that, and it's going to save it with the 32-bit with the alpha channel by default there. Now you can also save it as PNG, by the way, so you could go, if you prefer PNG, go to save and say, okay, this one is going to be PNG. Select that, and on the PNG, same file name, simply keep it like that as a PNG. And there may be some other formats to save it to, but it's really going to be up to you. Now you see this one takes much longer, by the way, because it's going to invoke the conversion service from what's it called, from anyone of course, ImageMagick, right? So all right, so that's it. That's how you create your assets and make sure that they are ready for prime time and use. And let's see if maybe I can use that stored image. Oh, and I have a little edge there. Look at that. I didn't remember that, but there is a little edge that may be there. So let's take care of that. Yeah. Look at that. See how we have this little edge on the side? We need to get rid of that. Okay, so the way we do is that because some of our selections ended up keeping the edge unchanged or unselected, what we need to do, let's go back in time here. Let's go and undo until we are, there you go, before we did this. All right, so let's take away the preview. What we really ought to do, all right, so right click perhaps. Okay, this is the point where we had, and I'm going to store that. Let's image filter, store image copy. There you go. All right, so what's going on is that the first line of pixels somehow didn't get selected, and what we can do is either erase it. Make sure it is selected. That we could do here with the custom brush in alpha mode, paint on alpha. There it is, hard, and simply paint over that. No, that's not the way. Hold on. Let's go and so you see where I'm going. It's going to take too long here, right? I mean, we could do that. Right click and go like that. Make sure perhaps the size is 100%. Yep, there it is. So that probably will take care of the selection thing not having been selected. But there still is a lot of wasted space around it. Even if we fix that one edge and the one on the left side, it's still going to have a lot of wasted space. All these pixels here that are not really useful for the tree. We don't need to save that tree with all this information around it. So why not just pick it up in a more tight area, clip a portion of it away, right? And so the way I would do that is really use this tool here. See this one here? This one is the custom brush. That's a control Control B, I believe. No, Control B is up here under this. That's to pick the entire selection, which happens to have included this part there, and that's why it ended up keeping it there. So what I'll do instead, oh, I think it's just B for brush, right? So that's the shortcut, but I can click that, and that's the custom brush selection tool. So now you get to select exactly what part of this image you want to keep. Look at your tree. You don't need all this wasted space on the left and to the right side. Let's say we want just this much. Click here till about this much. And in fact, you could even crop off the bottom here to say you don't want to keep the bottom of the tree. That's really up to you, depending on how you're going to use that. All right, so I'm going to go and pick it up with a little bit of margin on the left and right and the bottom, but I don't need all that garbage around it. So now that is what it picked up, and I can store that as a custom brush, and there you go. All right, so now this one, when I preview that, you're not going to see that edge anymore, right? The edge that we saw in the other brush. Here, let me show you the other brush. This is the other brush I picked first. That one shows this little edge at the top and the bottom. I don't know if that's a bug, probably not. It just picked, didn't go to that left edge, who knows. But we have a workaround for sure, and that's to actually, and that's this one here, that's to actually pick the portion we really care about. We can also resample that brush now. We can go to brush and say, I didn't need it that big. Although I always recommend, once you've done the work, don't make it smaller before you save it. Save the largest possible that you have. And then, but still, at some point, if you say that's all I need it smaller, go ahead and resample it. Right, and so now you have Control D to clear the selection, erase, maybe turn this image around or create a new image buffer. And let's go something really quick there. And let's go perhaps even make the brush even smaller. Let's go again to brush, resample it even smaller. There you go. So, okay, that. And so this one I don't need anymore. Get this out of the way. Here's my magic brush. And I've resampled it. That's not a stored copy in here, by the way. That's still the large original. So the one that I resampled through the brush menu here, I might want to store that as well. So here's another stored copy. That's the smaller one. So now I have two good brushes. This one here is a smaller one. I can stamp it down here or there. Oh, I'm still in this alpha drawing mode. Let's go and erase this, clear the selection, reset. You might want to just go to a simple brush here. That's a regular airbrush, and that'll be fine there. All right, so this one here is the smaller one. That's let's see, full opacity. Let's see it like that. There you go. And this one here is the big one. It's still the same. Great brush, and we can export either one of those and then use them perhaps in a 3D program or some compositing in animation here, either way. And if you forgot to reduce that blue, the white edge, I think we still have a little bit here. You can still do that in a custom brush too. That's really one place I like to do that too, by the way. So you go to pre-multiply, there it is, and say which color you want. It's in the primary color. Maybe it's white, maybe it's not light blue, with whatever your color is. But primary color, I think, has the one that we are interested in. Remove it, and so we have a little bit of a better result here. Store that in another brush and work it that way. So at that point, when you have your brush the way you can or want it, then you can go and save it to your to a file. Save it to PNG, save it to Targa first. That'll be the fastest way, and it won't depend on ImageMagick and other external plugins. What you can do then is also save it to PNG, export it to a couple of other formats if you must. All right, and thanks for watching. I know that was actually longer than I thought it would be. A couple of more things to show every time, I guess. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in another tutorial really soon.